Hi everyone, it's Emma, first year medical student on break between semesters 1 and 2. And I thought I would take this time to film some more sit-down style videos and things that have been requested. And one thing that was requested, thank you for requesting it, was the podcast that I'm currently listening to. Since I've started this semester of med school, I spend probably about a half hour in the morning and evenings commuting. And since that commute has started, as well as joining sort of the med Twitter and med Insta communities a little bit, my eyes have been opened to the world of podcasts. I have found so many podcasts, some by doctors, for doctors, or med students, some healthcare focused, and some that are just fun. I thought I would curate a list of 5 of my favorite podcasts, or at least the podcasts that I listen to most, and share them with you so you could enjoy them too. So I promise they aren't all med focused, but a few of them are, and the first one definitely is. It is Reconciling Medicine. Put a little picture here. I really love listening to Dr. Renee and John Parro. They are a super cool medical couple. Renee is a pediatric oncologist and John is a plastic surgeon, and together they have created this podcast. They met in med school and now have 2 really cute children. You can follow them on Instagram, and they share a really open and honest understanding of how they have brought medicine into their lives instead of forcing their lives around their careers. And I think that is some really refreshing and really important information for young students of medicine to work into their day-to-day lives. And it's really nice to see this successful couple really making their lives their goals and fitting or reconciling medicine and medical careers with lives that they want to live. I often tell people that they feel kind of like the really cool, supportive uncle and aunt that you have in your family that are just giving you like 2 thumbs up all the time and a pat on the back for, choosing you and choosing your life. And anytime I listen to their podcast, I always feel really inspired to continue to live my own path and carve my own journey. They really, really emphasize not comparing yourself to others and doing what you love with medicine. And they share just like little bits of their lives, which I think is really nice, so you feel like you get to know Renee and John as people. John seems hilarious, and the banter between the 2 of them is just really fun to watch. I also follow Dr. Renee Parro on Instagram, and I just find her super inspirational, but still very down to earth and very realistic. And I think they're really good role models to have, so I've really enjoyed their podcast so far. So if Renee and John are like the supportive aunt and uncle, then the next podcast recommendation is like the adoring big sister. So podcast number 2 is As a Woman by Natalie Crawford, MD. Natalie is a board-certified OBGYN/REI, focusing on inspiring and empowering women in medicine, but also just inspiring and empowering women in general to know more about their health. She does a really good job of balancing educational podcasts on OBGYN, REI topics, so like ovarian cysts, I think that's one that's coming, she says, infertility, fertility journeys, that kind of thing, so really healthcare educational focus, with also balancing and putting in inspirational conversations for women. So how can we as women navigate the healthcare field, challenges that she's come across, personal growth that she has come across, and sharing those journeys with us so we can grow in the same way. I often say that listening to her podcast feels like you just had a sleepover with your big sister, and she is there cheering you on, but also kind of giving you some tips and scolding for like misbehavior. So, doubting yourself, she'll give you a little tap on the wrist for that, or gossiping and things like that, things that women do to themselves that bring them down. So she's really focused on, empowering us as women to do better, to strive for our goals, and she really does a good job of holding us accountable. But I also really like her sort of educational side, and she makes some topics that maybe are a little bit out of reach, or you think are out of reach for med students, really approachable, because she wants those to also resonate with women who don't have a healthcare background. So, recommending her as well. This is the last one that is by a doctor, and it is a team of 2 people, and one of them isn't a doctor, so we're phasing out. So podcast 3 is Not Overthinking by Ali Abdal and his brother. I didn't write down what his brother's name is, I'll put it here. So yeah, it's two brothers, both highly successful. If you're on like med YouTube, you know who Ali Abdaal is, and his brother, I believe, works in software and runs his own successful email blast or blog. So sorry, I know more about Ali than your brother. But the two of them get together and they just chat about something. So it, Ali brings in his medical background. So there is that aspect, but it's not focused on medical topics. They'll bring up things like, why do we seek permission, or why do we make the certain purchases we do? What is an awkward silence, or what makes an awkward silence? So they just sit and they think about these things, and you kind of get a little insight into both of their minds. Sometimes they disagree because, brothers will always disagree on some things. And it's just, it's a podcast that is light and it is fun, but it still kind of makes you think. It kind of makes you go, what's my opinion on that? Or do I agree with them? Without necessarily being educationally focused. So I like this podcast when I don't necessarily want to be disengaged, but there's no consequences if I don't have an opinion on what they're talking about. It's just nice sort of background, really good for commuting in the morning when you're maybe not fully awake. Yeah, it's really entertaining. If you like a little bit of banter, if you like well thought out or just well said sort of arguments about sort of what makes us human and different topics that come across as being a human and interacting with other humans, check out Not Overthinking. Podcast 4, Not a Doctor, and that is the Anthropocene reviewed by John Green. This came up to me, recommended in the Apple Podcasts, because it's been going for a little while and, it's got a good following and people really enjoy it. And I'm one of those people now. It is just John Green literally going through a variety of topics. They are viewer suggested, I believe. And he does some research on the history of whatever that topic is, the current opinions on that topic, and he gives his own rating out of 5. He does everything from the Stanford marshmallow experiment to prom to pizza and viral meningitis. A little bit of med in there for some of us. And he explains what it is, the history of it, why people like it or don't like it, and what he rates it. It's really entertaining. I do find I'm learning a lot by listening to them, but again, it's not, you're sitting there in lecture taking notes, so it is refreshing. Again, no consequences if you don't actually learn anything or walk away with them, but you will walk away with some good party facts. And it's John Green, so it's well written and it's well spoken, and he's a pleasure to listen to. So for the Anthropocene reviewed, give it 4 out of 5. And if you listen to the podcast, you'll understand what that is. 5 out of 5 for me is very hard to obtain, so. Okay, and last but not least, as our lighting has changed a little bit, I'm sorry, is number 5, Nothing Much Happens, Bedtime Stories for Grown-Ups. And this isn't a podcast that you will necessarily listen to every day, but it is a podcast that may have been the first podcast I really subscribed to and opened and sought out, and I use it to help me sleep. So it is these beautiful, almost mundane, but so comforting stories written and narrated by Catherine Nicolai. And it is just stories where nothing much happens. So everything from walking down a street when it starts to snow, to opening up your cottage for a season, to a story of a summer night when she was a teenager. And they are just these very calm stories. She narrates them very slowly and very quietly and softly. And the idea is you turn it on and you listen to it while you're trying to let your mind rest and give your mind something else to listen and to think about, instead of your to-do list and everything that you didn't get done that day. She has done it very intentionally, so she goes through the story twice in each podcast, and she'll do the second time slower than the first. So if you happen to still be awake after listening to the story the first time, you know what to expect, and it's at a slower pace and it kind of lulls you to sleep. And the introduction to every podcast, she starts with, take a deep breath in and out, get comfy, put your phone down, and just listen. And I honestly think these podcasts have been invaluable in some of those days when I just can't turn off my brain and I can't sleep. So anybody that will listen, anybody I have a conversation with about sleep or being tired, I recommend Nothing Much Happens, Bedtime Stories for Grown-Ups. So those are the 5 podcasts that I'm really listening to right now. A little bit biased towards healthcare podcasts or podcasts made by healthcare people. But what can I say? I have a type. It's not my fault. I have linked them all down below just through Apple Podcasts because that's where I found them. I think all of them are available on sort of any podcast listening platform, but if you want to go check them out, check the links below, and you know, if you like them, leave a review, tell them I sent you, and I hope you enjoy. If you have any podcasts that you are listening to all the time or podcasts you think I should check out, definitely comment them below because I'm really enjoying podcasts now and a bit late in the game, but excited to kind of dive into more listening. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Actually, really quickly, I wanted to provide 2 bonus podcasts. I can never leave a list at just 5. It was really hard for me to narrow them down, so here are 2 bonus podcasts that I'm also currently listening to. First is the Undifferentiated Medical Student. It is created by a 4th-year medical student, Ian Drummond, and he basically just interviews people of different specialties about what their career is like, how they think their career compares to other careers or specialties in medicine, and what they would tell medical students. Really good, really informative. They can be a little long, and sometimes it's just a little bit much to listen to. I'm not really at that phase where I'm trying to narrow down specialties, but it's a good one to check out, especially if you're a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th medical student. Gives a really good insight into medical specialties in the United States, which are, you know, similar elsewhere. And the second bonus is Med Conversations. These are definitely podcasts that you would go seek out specifically for certain topics, or if you just want to spend a day or an afternoon learning something. They have specific podcasts for different medical anomalies or pathologies. So everything from chronic kidney disease to stroke disorder to children's asthma. And so if you are studying a concept and you're really just not getting it, or you're a very auditory-based learner, I definitely suggest looking on their list of podcasts and see if they cover the topic that you're trying to understand, and give them a listen. It's also a nice way to do some passive review while you're doing something else. So if you're kind of like me and if you're not studying, you feel like you should be, so maybe while you're doing the dishes or folding your laundry, turn the podcast on and listen to it. They don't go into too much detail, so you can listen passively, but you could also use them like an auditory lecture and take notes if you wanted to. They range from about 40 minutes to an hour, so you do want to kind of set some time aside if you're going to use them to fully learn something, and then obviously back it up with your class notes and other sources as well. But super handy, a good tool. I don't listen to them every day, but I have used them for some review of topics that I wanted to make sure I really understood. Okay, so now I'm actually done. Everything is linked down below. Make sure you comment if there's any podcasts that I should listen to. Subscribe if you want to see more videos. I put out vlogs about my life as a med student, and I'm hoping to create more videos like this, giving tips and tricks or things that I do as a med student. So I will see everyone in the next one, and I promise I'm actually done. Bye.